The room did not erupt in noise or celebration. Instead, it froze in a heavy silence that pressed down on everyone present. Princess Sophie sat perfectly still, her posture unchanged even as the trustees finished reading the final clause of Queen Elizabeth's private instructions. Those around her felt the weight of the moment before she could utter a single word. This was no ordinary inheritance of money, land, jewels, or public ceremony. It was something far more intimate and personal, a quiet revelation that carried decades of protected royal secrets. Queen Elizabeth's most private title, one held in silence and shielded from the world's eyes for so long, was now being passed to the woman least expecting its profound responsibility. Before diving deeper into what this truly means for the royal family today, remember to subscribe for every update on these unfolding stories that shape the monarchy. Sophie kept her hands folded neatly in her lap, but the atmosphere around her had shifted irrevocably. King Charles sat across the table, his fingers tightly locked together, his face etched with a pain no crown could ever conceal. Camilla, the queen consort, glanced toward Sophie with a look of controlled disbelief, her expression measured yet far from serene. Prince William observed the trustees carefully, understanding that this announcement had done more than honor Sophie. It had uncovered truths the family had long kept hidden from open discussion. The palace trustees, those discreet custodians entrusted with the late monarch's most confidential directives and the safeguarding of sensitive family decisions, formally confirmed Princess Sophie's inheritance of the title Keeper of the Sovereign's Private Confidence. This was no ornamental distinction but a profound responsibility that positioned her as the guardian of Queen Elizabeth's most personal judgments, her intimate reflections accumulated over decades of rule, and the sealed guidance that had quietly influenced critical moments in royal history. The role existed outside the realm of public ceremony or courtly decoration. It embodied trust in its purest form, a written commitment to protect and preserve what the Queen had chosen to entrust beyond the visible structures of monarchy. Sophie absorbed the announcement with measured composure, blinking slowly as the weight of the decision settled upon her. She had anticipated perhaps a private letter of appreciation or a understated family obligation, never this depth of emotional inheritance from the woman who had defined an era. No outsider would ever fully comprehend the layers of history and expectation contained within that single title. The trusted confidant did not reach for the folder with eagerness. She simply looked down, allowing the silence to speak, while King Charles began to grasp that his mother's choice transcended protocol and touched upon something far more personal and enduring. Camilla shifted almost imperceptibly in her seat, that small movement cutting through the heavy atmosphere like an unvoiced question. The Queen consort had walked beside Charles through years of public scrutiny and private challenges, sharing both the burdens of office and the quiet battles of personal life, yet this hidden title had bypassed her entirely. Charles understood the implications with the seasoned insight of one who had long borne the weight of expectation. William, observing the trustees with careful attention, saw the announcement not merely as an honor bestowed, but as a revelation of preferences and trusts the family had long preferred to keep from open examination. One trustee placed the sealed cream folder upon the table with deliberate care, his words carrying a quiet finality that left no room for ambiguity. Sophie had long exemplified a form of royal service noticed only when difficult matters required resolution without fanfare. She had stood steadfastly beside Queen Elizabeth during seasons of loneliness, family tensions, and public duties, demanding grace without the pursuit of acclaim. The trusted confidant had never sought to dominate conversations or transform duty into spectacle. That very quality made the Queen's decision strike with such profound resonance. The inherited title conveyed a deliberate message. Queen Elizabeth had chosen to separate the realm of private confidence from the formal mechanisms of the crown itself. Charles felt this separation keenly, as though a precise boundary had been drawn within the family's inner circle. The trustee spoke with the measured authority of one accustomed to handling the monarchy's most sensitive matters, revealing that Queen Elizabeth had finalized her approval of this transfer several years before her passing. The instructions had been meticulously sealed and protected until the precise moment when they could no longer remain private. Sophie finally allowed her eyes to rest fully on the cream-colored folder, and the question that had hovered unspoken in the room became impossible to dismiss. Why had the late Queen chosen her, a figure known for quiet competence rather than proximity to the direct line of succession? The title itself formed only the first layer of revelation. The deeper wound resided in the deliberate exclusions required to elevate Sophie to this position of intimate trust. Every face around that table carried its own form of silence, each revealing different facets of the family's inner reality. Sophie's expression reflected genuine shock at the weight suddenly placed upon her shoulders. Charles bore the visible injury of a son confronting unexpected boundaries in his mother's affections. Camilla maintained a carefully calculated composure that masked deeper calculations about her own place in this new configuration. William displayed a dawning recognition of the broader implications for family dynamics and institutional continuity. No formal public statement would ever be needed to convey the profound gravity of what had transpired in that room. This hidden title functioned as an unsparing mirror held up to the royal family, reflecting not merely long-standing traditions, but the Queen's final, deeply considered preferences, the trusts she had cultivated over decades, the subtle rejections inherent in any act of selection, and her ultimate emotional map for those she would leave behind. Sophie had devoted years to becoming the royal figure others turned to only when difficult, thankless tasks required discreet resolution. Her steadfast presence at Queen Elizabeth's side during lonely seasons, tense family storms, and demanding public duties had been characterized by grace without the pursuit of praise. The trusted confidant had never fought for dominance in any room, nor had she transformed dutiful service into personal performance. That fundamental quality explained why the announcement resonated with such unexpected emotional force throughout the assembled group. To truly understand the foundations of this decision, the narrative must return to the private evening the family would later refer to as the Windsor Vigil. Long before the trustees convened to open that fateful folder, another room had held its own heavy silence and a choice that would prove defining. This gathering occurred in the aftermath of a tense royal ceremony where the demands of public composure had strained against the realities of private discord. Queen Elizabeth had requested calm, unflinching honesty, and unwavering loyalty from those closest to her, not for the sake of appearances or courtiers, but for the very survival of the family and the institution it represented. She was no longer inquiring who could merely perform the duties of monarchy. She sought those who could protect its essence when pride, accumulated pain, and personal ambitions threatened to pull the entire structure apart. Charles had left the gathering before the conversation turned truly personal, a decision the king would later feel returned to him like a door quietly closing. He had believed the evening's discussions had reached their natural conclusion, that his devotion was understood without requiring further elaboration. Yet the Queen remained fully engaged in both spirit and judgment. She asked not for elaborate speeches, but for unvarnished truth. Sophie stayed when others departed. She listened as the monarch spoke openly about the profound loneliness of her position, the unrelenting pressures that accompanied every public moment, and the strange burden of being constantly surrounded by people while rarely being fully heard or understood. Sophie felt emotion rise within her, but chose not to interrupt with platitudes or rush to offer comfort that might diminish the moment's authenticity. The trusted confidant did not transform the Queen's vulnerability into an opportunity for self-display. She simply listened with complete presence, and that powerful restraint became more meaningful than any declaration of loyalty could have been. The monarch watched her carefully and recognized something rare within the complex web of family relationships: loyalty without underlying hunger for advancement, closeness without strategic calculation, and service offered without expectation of reward or recognition. According to the carefully documented account preserved within the sealed archives, Queen Elizabeth had taken time that same evening to compose a private note. In it, she identified Sophie as the only royal who had truly listened without attempting to steer the conversation toward personal advantage or strategic positioning. The note itself avoided any form of empty flattery. Instead, it extended a profound and considered trust, recognizing qualities that had proven rare within the intricate dynamics of royal family life. This document became the foundational element upon which the trustees would later base their formal decision. It was safeguarded with meticulous care through the intervening years, remaining protected until the moment arrived when the title could be transferred with the solemnity it deserved. Sophie's shock in the present carried this additional historical weight, transforming her understanding of the moment. The folder resting on the table was far more than administrative paperwork. It served as the living echo of that significant vigil, providing tangible evidence that one evening of quiet, honest listening had ultimately outweighed years of accumulated rank, physical closeness to the throne, and the expectations that typically accompany such proximity. When this important backstory eventually circulated more fully within the family circle, it did not function as a healing balm. Rather, it sharpened examples existing tensions and forced a more honest reckoning with long-held assumptions about favor and legacy. Charles's prolonged silence finally fractured as he pushed back his chair with deliberate force. The sound cut through the room's heavy atmosphere. Sophie lifted her eyes to meet his gaze directly. William held his breath for a moment. Camilla turned her face away, already sensing the difficult path the conversation was about to take. Then the king voiced the question that fundamentally altered the nature of the inheritance, turning it from a matter of protocol into something deeply personal and accusatory. Charles asked, with carefully controlled emotion, why his mother had chosen to entrust Sophie with aspects of her inner world that she had never fully extended to him. He did not raise his voice, and that very restraint lent the question even greater power and danger. The king looked directly at Sophie, his expression carrying the honest hurt of a son who had just confronted the reality that duty and intimate emotional understanding existed in separate spheres, sometimes painfully so. The trustees had already provided necessary clarification. The title carried no legal authority over matters of law, succession, or official governance. It remained strictly a private royal confidence, a personal role crafted specifically to protect Queen Elizabeth's moral instructions, her thoughtfully worded family warnings, and her quiet but considered judgments about the future direction of the institution. That crucial distinction should, in theory, have softened the emotional impact. Instead, it served only to deepen the wound. Sophie felt the room contract around her, the walls seeming closer as the implications settled. She had never sought to position herself above Charles or to assume any role that might inadvertently highlight his mother's reservations about certain aspects of his approach. When he directly asked whether she had possessed any prior knowledge of the arrangement, the trusted confidant answered with quiet sincerity that she had not. Her response carried complex layers of fear for the future, grief over the pain being caused, and an unwavering loyalty to both the late queen and the living family. She was not mounting a defense of her position, but rather attempting to navigate the difficult terrain of being placed squarely between the king's evident pain and the late monarch's explicit, unalterable command. William maintained his silence throughout, understanding all too well the inherent dangers in every word spoken during such a charged moment. The prince recognized that while Charles had received the throne, the crown, and the immense public burdens that accompanied kingship, Sophie had been selected for a different, more intimate form of responsibility. Power within the ancient institution of monarchy rarely reveals itself through dramatic public gestures or ostentatious displays. More often, its most potent expressions operate through subtle mechanisms: locked cabinets containing decades of private correspondence, meticulously worded documents signed in quiet moments, and the disciplined hands of a small cadre of individuals trained from early in their careers never to flinch, never to leak, and never to question the weight of what they safeguard. As Sophie sat absorbing the full magnitude of what had been unexpectedly placed upon her, the trustees methodically unveiled the intricate machinery that had enabled and protected this decision for years. With each layer they revealed, Charles felt a growing realization settle over him like a heavy cloak. This was no impulsive family gesture born of momentary sentiment. It represented a carefully orchestrated, long-guarded command from the late monarch, one that had been insulated from interference through layers of protocol and trusted intermediaries. Sophie listened intently as the conversation transitioned from the raw turbulence of human emotion into the colder, more precise realm of institutional procedure and historical precedent. This shift only intensified the sense of burden, making the role feel less like an honor and more like an inescapable covenant with the past. The trustees explained that Queen Elizabeth had conceived this private title with deliberate foresight, intending it as a vessel to preserve her personal guidance on maintaining family cohesion during times of fracture, upholding royal restraint when provocation tempted otherwise, and shielding younger members of the family from the most corrosive aspects of public exposure and judgment. These concerns had weighed heavily on her because she had lived through and personally witnessed the family navigate successive waves of public scandal, private betrayals, and internal divisions that no amount of ceremonial pomp or media management could fully mend or conceal. The machinery of her will had been engineered to outlast her physical presence, ensuring her moral compass would continue to influence the institution she had devoted her life to. The title was never designed to function as binding law or enforceable decree, but rather as a form of enduring conscience, a quiet voice of moral authority that could speak across time to those willing to listen with humility. Charles absorbed these explanations and felt the emotional wound cut deeper with each new insight, forcing him him to confront the possibility that his mother's trust had been distributed according to criteria that transcended simple filial proximity. He could no longer frame the title as a sentimental afterthought or minor gesture of appreciation. The trustees emphasized the precise nature of ceremonial custody. Sophie would not take personal ownership of the Queen's letters or exert control over the monarchy's operational machinery. Instead, she would assume the solemn duty of safeguarding confidential papers, deeply private reflections, and sealed family instructions intimately connected to the monarch's most personal observations and judgments formed over 70 years of unparalleled service. This careful distinction between possession and stewardship rendered the decision all the more profound and binding. Sophie had not inherited authority over the crown's visible structures. She had been entrusted with the stewardship of its hidden heart. William continued to observe her responses with quiet intensity, developing a growing respect for the grace with which she bore this unexpected elevation. Sophie displayed no trace of triumph or self-satisfaction. Instead, her demeanor conveyed genuine trepidation, almost a quiet fear of the role now crystallizing around her. That authentic restraint spoke volumes to William about why his grandmother had chosen her above others who might have seemed more obvious candidates. The trusted confidant had never pursued dominance, never attempted to leverage personal closeness into measurable influence, and never demanded greater prominence in the official narrative of royal history. Because she had consistently refrained from grasping at power, she had been granted a form of it that few could request without corrupting its essential nature. Once the formal proceedings drew to a close and the family began to disperse from that charged room, an irreversible shift occurred in the palace's atmosphere. Nothing felt quite the same. By nightfall, the title had transcended its status as Sophie's solitary responsibility. It had started reshaping the delicate web of relationships, expectations, and unspoken hierarchies that defined daily royal life. The initial consequences emerged not through explosive confrontation, but through a series of understated adjustments. A door closed with unusual softness. An aide stepped back with studied politeness. A realization struck Camilla with particular clarity and force. Sophie now possessed access to chambers of royal memory and documentation that remained firmly closed to the Queen Consort. In an institution built layer upon layer of symbols, traditions, and carefully calibrated appearances, such exclusion derived its power from its very politeness and seeming inevitability. Camilla understood the depth of this slight before anyone named it openly. After the trustees' meeting, palace staff initiated the meticulous preparation of a dedicated private archive room for Sophie's use. Every action carried layered significance. This archive was far more than storage. It served as a protected sanctuary housing Queen Elizabeth's most intimate writings, candid reflections, and sealed family instructions, kept separate from routine household access. These materials captured not dry historical facts, but the late monarch's unfiltered perspectives on loyalty under pressure, duty sustained through isolation, restraint exercised amid temptation, and the individuals who had proven reliable when the crown faced profound strain. Sophie received this news with visible apprehension she made no effort to conceal. The trusted confidant had already been deeply unsettled by the title. The archive made the responsibility immediate and concrete. She was being asked to enter the late monarch's most guarded inner world, to read what others had been deliberately denied, and to shoulder the moral weight of insights withheld from others. This privilege felt less like victory and more like an immense, humbling pressure testing her limits. It placed her at the intersection of revered memory and living familial pain, between the Queen's final wishes and the complex emotions of those continuing her work. Camilla was informed with diplomatic precision that certain Queen Elizabeth papers would remain restricted exclusively to Sophie and the trustees. The Queen Consort sat alone afterward, absorbing the reality that the late monarch's most private realm had been placed systematically beyond her reach. Charles attempted consolation, but his own unresolved feelings made his words fragile. He wished to shield his wife, yet could not deny the deeper truth. His mother had deliberately included Sophie within her most intimate circle of confidence. The quiet exclusion sharpened when an aide removed Camilla's name from a review list connected to the Queen's private materials. Executed with impeccable control, the gesture carried merciless politeness. No voices were raised, yet its meaning resonated. Public partnership remained intact, but private access to the late Queen's conscience now belonged to another. Sophie soon discovered a final handwritten instruction labeled for her attention first. The title tightened around her like an irrevocable vow. She faced a personal crossroads: retreat behind procedure surrender or confront the family as the Queen's chosen guardian. When she ceased avoiding the role's full weight, the story moved from shock toward resolve. Alone with William near a closed window, she voiced her deepest fear, whether acceptance would inflict irreparable harm on family bonds. William's response proved pivotal. He understood the conflicting forces pulling at her. The title held no legal override, yet its moral influence could shape the monarchy's character for years. Sophie now carried the late Queen's private confidence, earned through quiet consistency rather than entitlement. William saw her fear and addressed it with empathy. True guardianship meant safeguarding core values without sowing division. Their conversation unfolded with the depth shared only by those familiar with royal life's underside. Sophie reflected on her years of unobtrusive support, recognizing how those moments had built this trust. William helped reframe the role as a bridge between past wisdom and present needs, easing her isolation. This exchange marked Sophie's transition from burden to purpose. Charles and Camilla processed the changes, drawing on years of resilience. The king contemplated his mother's criteria for trust, seeking reconciliation between injury and respect. Camilla confronted the boundary between public role and private exclusion. Sophie approached her duties with humility, ensuring archive insights promoted unity. William's support facilitated dialogue, preventing misunderstandings from hardening. The household adjusted gradually, each member finding equilibrium in the new configuration of trust and responsibility. The title signaled deeper shifts in balancing public performance with private legacy. It reminded all that crowns pass by lineage, but confidences are granted through character refined over time. Sophie's service exemplified this. Family reflections fostered appreciation for diverse contributions. Charles found solace in his mother's enduring wisdom despite its unexpected delivery. Camilla's resilience strengthened their partnership. The experience prompted honest discussions about loyalty and service. Younger royals might learn the weight of quiet reliability versus visible rank. Sophie's stewardship modeled responsible guardianship, transforming potential division into thoughtful continuity. The monarchy's strength lies in such adaptations, where personal legacies inform institutional endurance without disrupting its public face. Queen Elizabeth's choice highlighted character as the true foundation for trust. Sophie's restraint, loyalty without ambition, and service without fanfare had distinguished her. Family members, reflecting on their own paths, gained renewed respect for qualities transcending ceremony. This introspection fortified internal foundations amid external pressures. The once disruptive title evolved into a source of guidance. Sophie's conscientious approach demonstrated the maturity required to honor such an inheritance. Her efforts ensured the Queen's voice continued speaking through discretion rather than decree. The role became a living link, connecting generations through shared values of duty and reflection. Future narratives would reference this chapter as evidence of the monarchy's capacity for nuanced evolution. Integration of the keeper role affirmed the institution's adaptability. Sophie drew upon the archives for perspective on contemporary issues, exercising wisdom and restraint. William bridged generational understanding, ensuring insights enriched without isolating. Charles and Camilla adapted with dignity. The experience showcased the monarchy's resilience. Future chapters would build upon this foundation of thoughtful inheritance. Sophie's approach preserved the past's wisdom while addressing present realities. The title served as both responsibility and bridge, linking eras through commitment to duty and reflection. Discretion defined the title's essence. Sophie exercised it thoughtfully in managing access and applying insights. This approach earned respect, converting tension into collaboration. Quiet power often proves most durable in sustaining institutions through change. Sophie's conduct honored both the Queen's intent and the family's living needs. The role exemplified how influence can operate effectively without ostentation. Family members recognized the value of such restraint in preserving harmony. The monarchy benefited from this model of thoughtful stewardship, where personal character supports institutional resilience. Queen Elizabeth had judged character as the ultimate qualification for intimate trust. Sophie's embodiment of these virtues provided a template. Contemplating their legacies, family members appreciated qualities beyond rank. This reflection strengthened the monarchy's moral core. The title, initially jarring, became a catalyst for growth. Sophie's stewardship transformed it into a quiet force for unity. Her example underscored that true service often unfolds away from public view. The family's collective journey highlighted the rewards of navigating complexity with grace and foresight. The gradual integration of the keeper role into palace rhythms affirmed continuity amid transition. transition. Sophie applied the Queen's reflections to current challenges with care. William's involvement ensured intergenerational dialogue. Charles and Camilla incorporated the reality into their shared life, finding strength in partnership. The experience illuminated the monarchy's ability to evolve while honoring tradition. Sophie's humility prevented the title from becoming a wedge. Instead, it fostered deeper appreciation for the human elements sustaining the crown. Reflections on the Windsor Vigil reinforced themes of honest listening and moral courage. The family advanced with greater awareness of how private trusts shape public legacies. Queen Elizabeth's private map of confidence endures through Sophie's stewardship. It offers guidance relevant to modern royal life while respecting family dynamics. The shared journey reflects legacy's complexities and rewards. In quiet chambers of memory and duty, the monarchy finds its deepest strength, navigating human truths across generations. This inheritance stands as testament to a monarch's careful judgment and the power of quiet trust. Sophie's role ensures its influence persists, shaping the institution with wisdom and humanity. The map remains a living guide, reminding all that some legacies resonate most profoundly in silence and faithful preservation. The first consequences emerged subtly after the trustees departed. Palace routines adjusted with quiet precision. Sophie confronted the archive's reality with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Each document represented not just words but lived experience and hard-won wisdom. Camilla processed her exclusion through private reflection, drawing on inner strength developed over decades. Charles balanced his sense of loss with respect for his mother's intentions. William provided a steady presence, helping Sophie articulate her concerns without fear of judgment. Their window-side conversation revealed the emotional terrain's complexity. Loyalty to the Queen pulled against loyalty to the living family. Pain coexisted with resolve. Sophie began to see her role as a form of service that required balancing these tensions daily. The burden, once overwhelming, started feeling like a calling shaped by years of preparation. This confrontation marked the beginning of deeper emotional integration for all involved. Discretion became Sophie's guiding principle in the days that followed. She reviewed materials with care, ensuring insights served unity rather than division. This quiet power influenced family interactions without fanfare. Camilla observed Sophie's approach and found space for her own reflections on resilience. Charles engaged in conversations that acknowledged the change while reaffirming shared purpose. William noted how restraint echoed the Queen's own style. The title's influence operated through subtle guidance rather than command. Family members recognized its value in preserving harmony amid change. Sophie's example illustrated how discretion sustains institutions where louder approaches might fracture them. The role thus embodied a form of power that strengthened rather than disrupted. Character emerged as the central theme in family reflections. Queen Elizabeth had chosen based on observed consistency over years. Sophie's lack of ambition had made her trustworthy. This prompted others to examine their own qualities. Charles considered how public duty intersects with private trust. Camilla reflected on paths to acceptance. Younger generations gained perspective on what endures beyond titles. Sophie's stewardship highlighted character as the true measure of legacy. The title became a mirror for self-examination, fostering growth. Reflections reinforced that genuine influence stems from integrity, not position. The family's journey deepened their collective understanding of royal service. Continuity was maintained through careful adaptation. Sophie integrated archive wisdom into ongoing responsibilities. William facilitated understanding across generations. Charles and Camilla found new rhythms in their partnership. The monarchy demonstrated its capacity to evolve without losing essence. Sophie's humility modeled graceful change. The title supported rather than supplanted existing structures. Future decisions would reference this period as an example of thoughtful transition. Reflections on past and present wove a stronger narrative for the institution. The family emerged with renewed commitment to shared values amid evolving roles. The enduring map of Queen Elizabeth's memory continues guiding through Sophie's care. It provides timeless insights applicable to contemporary challenges. Family dynamics benefit from its respectful integration. The shared journey embodies legacy's depth. In chambers of quiet duty, the monarchy renews its strength through human truths. This inheritance testifies to careful judgment and quiet trust's power. Sophie's role ensures lasting influence. The map serves as a living compass, emphasizing preservation in silence. Legacies like this shape institutions profoundly, reminding us that true continuity flows from character and faithful stewardship across time.